very special guest is already on the Flow video platform. Mr. Giovani James is a crime and security consultant. He's also an attorney at law and a former advisor on crime and security. Just before we bring Mr. James on, let me just quickly deal with an issue on the social media. So just hold on for me, Mr. James, okay? We'll move to him shortly. Mazi Daisy, who, let me just clarify, she's asked, well, not clarify, no need to clarify anything. So because crime is on, we must stop all development, like the box park must stop. What nonsense. Nobody's saying that. Nobody said that. Nobody said to stop the box park. What I'm saying, Mazi, it makes no sense building box parks if you cannot address and deal with the issues of safety happening right in the heart of Castries, affecting school students. Teachers are fearful. That's what I'm saying. Build as many box parks as you wish. Development is good. But it makes no sense if our students are safe that we're chilling in box parks. So make sure you quote me correctly when you do. Thanks for listening, Mazi. We love you. We love you likewise. So that's what we're saying. Let's deal with the issues. If I had the 6.2 million now with the alarming rate of crime, I'm investing in beefing up safety and security around schools, and I am invested in solid after-school programs. But I don't have that money to spend now. My next special guest already on. Mr. James, welcome. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Good morning, Shannon, and good morning to your viewers.
Good morning. Thank you. It's always a pleasure seeing you, and first time on the platform. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Attorney at law, former crime and security advisor, current crime and security consultant. When you see what's happening in and around Castries, what's your advice?
Shannon,
go ahead.
I want to say that it is alarming, but I think we must put it into perspective in that it is not something new. I can tell you as far back as when I went to school in the 90s in Castries, we had instances of robberies, injuries sustained by students. And so it is nothing new. What I can say that is different now is the advent of social media and the use of mobile devices to capture what is going on. But being a former police officer, I can tell you it is not something that is unusual. It is simply a matter where there is more reporting and more capturing of what is happening now. However, I must say that with more schools being concentrated in the north of the island, we are seeing a lot more crime taking place, not just against students, but also involving students. So it is quite alarming, and it is something that we must address. I think you would have seen the Minister of Education recently speaking on the issue of loitering in the city of Castries and the disobedience, the distraction, all of what it is causing. So it is something that has to be addressed. And if we do not address it, I anticipate that we are going to have a lot of problems, especially leading up to the Christmas.
Let's talk about the loitering for a bit. It's a big problem after school hours as well. But even during school, you have some individuals who loiter. Based on your experience, should there be a parameter developed in and around a school, a zone which makes it illegal to assemble, illegal to do certain activities?
Well, what I will say, Shannon, is that there are actually laws dealing with loitering and also to hold parents accountable where children do not go to school. It is a requirement under the law that unless you have homeschooling, by way of example, that all students are supposed to be in school. So if you have children who are loitering about the place, then someone needs to be held accountable. And in this case, I would say parents need to be held accountable. Of course, public society has to play its role if there are individuals who are loitering. But the issue seems to be concentrated in terms of after school. So between the hours of 2:30 to 5 p.m., that is when you have most of the loitering taking place. I have personally had to ask students to disperse and go home. But that is my responsibility, my social responsibility. And perhaps if more adults were to do the same, we may see less and less of it happening. But the question for me, Shannon, is if students are loitering, what is there in place to ensure that they get engaged in other activities? So one of the things that I'm hoping for us to talk about is after-school programs. The fact that we basically do not have after-school programs where these children can get involved in some meaningful activity. We expect them to be around town because most likely the parents are working up until 4:35 and sometimes even until late. And so what is in place for those children who are unsupervised? And for me, I believe that we need to start looking into after-school programs. I mean, you have some of the football programs, you have some programs that have been started by the schools, but we need to do more than that. I remember growing up, you had the cadets meeting, the scouts meeting after school, you had the Girl Guides. There were so many different programs. You had a DARE program with the police and many other like programs, sporting programs. And perhaps we need to be looking at some of these, bringing those back, and perhaps starting it from the school level. So you don't leave the school compound, but there are certain activities that you can engage in at the schools. So I think we really need to do something in relation to loitering. I can tell you that when I was a police officer, it became so bad at one point that we were given instructions to perhaps address specifically the issue of after-school loitering. And so you would have seen the arrest of some delinquent students. And of course, the arrest was not to punish them, but to send a message that, hey, it is getting out of hand and persons will be held accountable. Parents will have to answer for their children loitering, getting involved in delinquent activity in cash streets.
We will talk about what a 21st century after-school program looks like in your mind in just a bit, because it cannot be just a after-school program on that title. It has to meet the needs of the current generation. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But let me stick a pin. If you didn't know, Giovani, Mr. James is actually a former officer attached to the Regional Security System, RSS, correct?
Yes, yes, indeed.
And if you haven't known before, he has trained judges, he has trained policemen and lawyers throughout the Caribbean. You thought I didn't know that, huh?
You did.
Valuable experience he brings to the platform. When you see what's happening in Castries, the attacks on students, the police don't have all the resources. What strategy would you employ in Castries to keep students and teachers, school officials safe after school hours?
Shannon, this is a difficult question to answer. It's difficult in the sense that in the absence of resources and in the absence of a collaborative effort by all stakeholders, and when I say all stakeholders, I'm talking about the police, I'm talking about civil society, parents, the schools, it is an issue that is going to persist unless we all come together to dealing with it. I can sit here and say, you know what, I believe the easiest solution is that all kids should go home immediately after school. But let us face it, that is not going to happen. For me, I believe it is a matter of prioritizing resources. Parents expect the police to protect their children. The schools expect the police to provide security. So therefore, it requires us to prioritize what we do in relation to the protection of our children in the city center. Let's look at the example of the COVID wardens. When we had the COVID wardens in the city of Castries, at every street corner, you'd see at least 2 or 3 of them. But no sooner we relaxed our COVID regulations, those officers would no longer sin. And so for me, presence is very important. We are too reactive and we need to be proactive. And perhaps it is a time when the government, the police should actually consider the employment of persons it doesn't necessarily have to be throughout the day, but at peak times to have officers at every street corner patrolling, just as we had with the with the COVID
COVID
wardens,
wardens.
to ensure that the mere presence of law enforcement will be a deterrence for persons who would want to commit crimes such as robberies. Because robberies are crimes of opportunity. And if the opportunity presents itself in the absence of police being there, then we should see it continuing to happen. So perhaps we really need to look at deploying resources in those peak hours to be able to address these concerns.
Yeah, I think that's a significant recommendation from you there. As you say, not 24 hours a day, not 8 to 5 neither, but key hours, and especially now heading into the festive season, I think that recommendation is sound and well placed. But let's talk engagement of students in a meaningful way after they have exited the classroom. After school programs is the nomenclature that's often used. What sort of design do you see it having in your mind now? Because we have to keep the kids engaged, yes, but if they're not interested, they wouldn't come.
That is true. I can tell you, Shannon, recently my son, who is just 10 years old, says to me, Daddy, I want to start a YouTube channel because that is where the money is. And for me, that is where we need to go. Break away from traditional type of after-school programs, but have programs that would basically allow children to be able to use their mind, to be able to go, whether it be in computer science, in social programming, in terms of social media. I mean, he doesn't know how to do it, and he wants to at the age of 10. And it gives persons the opportunity, children the opportunity to tap into this natural talent that they may have, this natural inquisition. You know, they want to know more about those things. To have ICT centers where persons are able to not just go and surf and be on social media, but have individuals who can assist them in terms of building a website, in terms of building the social media platform, giving ideas in terms of what is current, what is likely to make money. I think that is where we need to go. You have persons who may want to go into TVET type programs, technical vocation. Yes. Why not do something in terms of after school, okay, to allow them to be part of it? And I happened to catch a bit of what the former or the district education officer was talking about in terms of basically trying to get children to move away, or we need to move away from the traditional type of teaching. I think it is quite important for us to do that. And we should look at teaching not as being within school hours only, okay, but after school. And so some of these types of programs may actually assist. One thing that comes to mind in terms of a sort of after school type program is that I remember a few years ago we would have developed, and that was because we recognized the need for mentoring of young children. We developed this program called the Big Brothers and Sisters of St. Lucia. I can tell you that it was a brainchild of a former magistrate who was in St. Lucia, Anne-Marie Smith, who is currently a judge in Antigua right now. And it came as a result of the number of juveniles, young persons who were coming before us, before the courts, having committed offenses or being involved in offenses. And what stood out was that most of those persons had absolutely no form of guidance. The parents they came from single parent households. Parents were constantly working, just trying to make ends meet. These children came from poor family backgrounds. So all of this basically was just a catalyst in terms of them turning to crime or being involved in delinquent behavior. And so we sought to identify key persons who could mentor these young persons in terms of setting them along the right path, being able to give them career advice, and going as far as assisting them financially. And so I want to take the opportunity to recognize Dr. Venus Sherry for his role in trying to get children into education and showing the importance of assisting persons in education.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said there. And thanks for that last contribution. Let me go deeper to one of the current day challenges, the involvement of gangs and student association with gangs. From your experience, so how do we begin to dismantle the gangs which are attracting more and more students and becoming a greater threat to more and more students and teachers as well?
Gang life is something that will continue to happen with the development of any country, as long as you do not have alternatives for persons to engage in. They will find themselves being attracted to the gang life. And so we need to start with what we put out there, be it on television, on the radio, because there's some level of sensationalism of this gang life, this gang culture. Okay, you listen to some of the songs. She Like Badman, for example, Skilly Bang. So all of that shows you that there is promotion of this sort of gang culture, gang life. And so there must be responsibility on the part of our media houses, first and foremost, not to sensationalize it. Our artists, musicians, okay, to show persons that really, though they may sing about those things, though we may see videos in relation to gang culture, you know, the bling, the money, okay, the fast life ends with just one result, and that is early death. And so what we need to start doing, for me, I say we need to start getting persons who have lived a different lifestyle, professionals, should become involved. So I respect persons like Dr. King, who has taken the opportunity to lead young people away from that lifestyle. But again, Shannon, it goes back to what I've said. If you cannot provide avenues for people, for young people, they are going to naturally gravitate towards crime and gang culture.
So with that said, are we failing the current generation by not providing alternative opportunities for them?
The simple answer is yes, we are. The simple answer is yes. We are failing this generation. I mean, how many persons will actually stand up and say, you know what, we are going to take a firm stance against what is happening in relation to gang culture? We have become desensitized in relation to gun crimes, in relation to violence. And it's like, you know what, it's not my business until it hits home. And so we must take responsibility as a people, as a nation, and not simply just rely on the police, by way of example, to protect us. But we have to play our part. We have to lead our children along the right path so that they see gang culture as being something that is bad, something that they should stay away from.
Let's talk for a bit about social responsibility as well. Many years ago, everybody paid attention to what the other person's children was doing. Now it appears that people take an approach, it's not my business. Society has a role to play in guiding students along as well.
Indeed. And that was raised by the last presenter in terms of the role of the community being a family. That is not present now because everybody is isolated. And so we must expect these sort of things to happen. In my time, if I was on the road late, I can guarantee you somebody would be calling my parents and saying, hey, your son is out. What is he doing out? Okay, and if I got home late, I would have questions to answer. I would be disciplined. So yes, society does have a role to play. The question is, with the evolution of what society is now, can we really say that what applied in the past and worked in the past is likely to work now? When families have become more insular in nature, okay, there's no longer this community spirit and everybody looks out for themselves. And so we really need to start revisiting what the role of the community is, what the role of the church is, and of course, come up with certain programs, activities from at a community level, I would say, in terms of trying to get persons back into the spirit of being their brother's keeper, looking out for each other. So if a mother, for example, has to work late, she can feel comfortable that the neighbor is going to watch her kids for her. So the kids don't have to stay in the streets of Castries until 6, 7 p.m. when nobody has any account for them.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to continue to be our brother's keeper. And it's a discussion that we can have. I think some of the stuff which worked in the past still has a role to play, but we need to evolve with the times.
With the times
as well. Our in-studio number 4500 4500777, or you can send us a WhatsApp 5840600 5840600. We're on the go with Flo, and my very special guest is a former advisor on crime and security, attorney at law as well. And he is here discussing the issue of deviant behavior and our approach to tackling what's happening on the streets, with reference to student attacks and student and school safety as well. The moves to improve CCTV surveillance at institutions around the island, you think, how much of a deterrent do you think that will have?
I think it is going to have a huge deterrence. It is going to have a huge deterrence. I can tell you, when I served as National Security Advisor, one of the things that we were keen on seeing happening in St. Lucia is the installation of CCTV cameras throughout the city of Castries and environs, and in fact throughout St. Lucia. That for me is not just a deterrence, because just imagine you want to commit a crime, you want to rob somebody, but then there are cameras everywhere. You're going to think twice. Should I be committing this crime? Or you may want to cover up yourself to rob somebody. But because there are cameras everywhere, you're not going to be walking with a mask, for example, throughout the city of Castries just to commit that crime. The alternative is that if a crime is committed, it makes it a lot easier for the police to be able to investigate this matter. I can tell you, look at the UK by way of example. Okay, the UK is one of the places where you have the most CCTV coverage. You go nowhere in the UK, it won't be covered by CCTV cameras, and it is quite effective in terms of being able to investigate crimes deter. I can tell you that one of the things that I thought of in relation to CCTV coverage, and one must bear in mind that with all of that, there is a cost component. And with our current economic climate, one had to decide where's the money going to come from? How are we going to be able to do that? So for me, one of the alternatives was, how about we provide concessions to private business owners, to homeowners, to be able to acquire CCTV cameras on the basis that there should always be a camera covering the outside, so the streets. It comes at no cost to the government, but at the cost of the homeowner or the business owner. And of course, the police would have access to that CCTV. And I think for me, it would make a world of a difference if we were to do that. have CCTV throughout St. Lucia.
Excellent recommendation on incentivizing private citizens, which comes at, as you say, no cost to the state. A few minutes left on the program, and let me allow you. I'm going to shift focus. There's a matter that I want to question you on by special request, by the way. So I will be shifting focus in just a bit. Let me allow you final 60 seconds to share recommendations to parents going into the Christmas season. What do they say? How do they prepare their children for the threat that is now on the streets of our country?
Shannon, as I said earlier, robberies, assaults on kids, these are crimes of opportunity. I can only say what I say to my son. The advice I give to my son is what I will give to parents. And I say, when you go to school, devices such as iPhones, iPads, smart devices, keep those devices at home. Mm-hmm. I send my son to school with a Toronto. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants it. I don't send my son to school with expensive shoes. Nobody wants it. And that is where we need to be looking. However, we cannot tell parents, all parents, this is what you should do. So my advice is that if there's ever a situation where a student is robbed, think of life over device, mm-hmm. or over whatever property is being taken. And I say that because you can replace a phone, you can replace a pair of shoes, a cap, money, but you cannot replace a life. Mm-hmm. And for me, what I would say to parents is that we need to be speaking to our children about the value of life over the value of property. So if you are robbed, pay attention to the individual, description of clothing, what he or she looks like, as opposed to pursuing or trying to retrieve the device or whatever has been stolen. And I make this recommendation because of what happened to the young boy a few weeks ago. Had he not pursued, it is more likely than not that he would not have been stabbed. Mm-hmm. But he would have still had the opportunity to describe to the police the description of his assailant. And so this would be my advice to parents. Yeah. Speak to your children about life over property.
Excellent way to end this part of the discourse. Mr. Giovani James, I'm moving quickly here because we have a limited time left. Yes. Mr. Giovani James is a former national security advisor. Mr. James, if I mention the term bench trials, how much of a bell is rung in your head?
I can tell you that I was very much involved in bench trials, and I'm hoping that it is still going to come through. We did quite a bit of work. A committee would have been set up because upon taking up the position as security advisor, one of the things that I wanted to see addressed as quickly as possible was the issue of court backlogs, in terms of backlogs in the court system. And so with COVID, having to deal with COVID and the restrictions put in place, we felt it was necessary to fast track bench trials in terms of bringing it on, because the time that it would take to hear a trial, the resources that it would take to host this trial is far less than having a jury. It is sad to say that I have not been able to get any update on that. I can say to you that I would have personally visited the Bodley Correctional Facility. I would have had interviews and discussions with the inmates because it affects them. Mm-hmm. And what I can say is that there was almost 80% buy-in to bench trials, because the inmates were not concerned about whether it was a judge or a jury who would deliberate on the matter, but actually getting their day in court. And so I really hope that the issue of bench trials is going to become a live one again. Legislation would have been drafted in relation to that. There would have been consultation at all levels, including at the Supreme Court level. And when I say Supreme Court level, I'm talking about engagement with the Chief Justice, who had a representative on the committee. So we need to see bench trials coming about. It is going to make a huge difference in the current state of the justice system in St. Lucia. It has worked in other jurisdictions. It has worked in Trinidad. It is working in Antigua. It is working in Belize. And I think it is something that we should definitely prioritize in terms of seeing this backlog being addressed.
But what's the hold up? If we are really interested in people, justice, and human rights, what's the hold up?
What I can say, Shannon, is that when I was security advisor, it stopped at the stage of the Attorney General's chambers, because what we need now is the legislation to be able to move ahead. So if I had to be quite frank, I would say the current holdup is at the Attorney General's office.
So you need,
in terms of simply passing the necessary or drafting the necessary, well, the legislation was drafted, a review of the legislation so that it can be taken to Parliament.
So we need political willpower.
Yes, we do.
If we're interested in guaranteeing people justice.
Indeed. And I really cannot say whether or not there's a political willpower. I have lost touch with what is happening in relation to bench trials, save and except to say that I'm really hoping that it is something that is a matter of a priority for this administration.
Let me just say, based on all the work that you did in setting up the program, setting up the initiative, the idea with the team, I even though you have been out of touch, at least some institutions should have been in touch with you to get your views. And I'm just saying that is my personal opinion on the matter. For ordinary citizens, what is a bench trial? Explain to them.
A bench trial is quite simple. It is simply where, instead of having a jury of 9 or 12, a single or 3 judges will deliberate on the matter. The benefit of having a bench trial is that a judge is already seized of the knowledge and experience in relation to matters of law. A judge would be able to easily receive the evidence and make a determination as to whether this individual is innocent or guilty. It is still going to be on the basis of facts. There is nothing that would infringe on the rights of a defendant in this matter. And so if you were to look at it, especially now when we still grapple with COVID restrictions, I can tell you that I have been to the High Court on numerous occasions. And one of the things that comes up quite frequently is the absence of adequate space to be able to host or hold a jury trial. If we were to, and I would ask you to do that, Shannon, do some investigations in relation to how many murder cases have taken place from 2020 up until now. And you will see that they are few. And it is not because the judges are not willing or are unable
to try the cases,
to hear those trials, but the reality is we have so many constraints in relation to having jury trials.
Yeah,
it works. Recently I spoke to Justice Smith, as I mentioned her before, out of Antigua, and she loves it because she's able to hold so many of those trials. I would have spoken to judges out of Trinidad and Belize, and the review is the same. There's nothing to lose out of having a bench trial, and there's much to gain.
Yeah, and you would free up that bottleneck of backlog cases and
Indeed,
give people um, an opportunity to receive justice.
that is correct.
Yeah. Giovanni, I want to thank you. I too remain cautiously optimistic like yourself that it will be brought back on the front burner and we'll hear something very soon about bench trials. I want to thank you for coming on this morning. Valuable contribution. I'm certain that it made an impression on our way of thinking here in St. Lucia. So thanks for being my guest on this edition of the show.
You're welcome, Shannon. It was a pleasure being here, and hopefully I get to come on again because I'm passionate about the crime situation in St. Lucia. And of course, not just sitting back and commenting on social media or speaking behind the scenes, but having an active role in ensuring that St. Lucia is a safer place for us all.
Yeah. You have my commitment. We will bring you back again.
Indeed. You have a good day.
Former National Security Advisor Giovani James is also an attorney at law, and did you know he has also trained across the Caribbean judges, policemen, former member of the regional security system as well. That's the time on today's program. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing, with another informative, educational, and stimulating package. I want to invite you from now to join me from 6 up until 9. Special announcement: the former Prime Minister, not the former Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, current Minister for Tourism, Investment and Culture, Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, will be my special guest tomorrow, Friday, to close the week. It is expected to be a banger. We're talking the recently signed deal for the development of the port in Castries and in Soufrière. It's going to be an exclusive and hot one, Friday, with Dr. Ernest Hilaire, right here on Good Morning St. Lucia. I'll see you then. And on behalf of everyone who worked so hard to keep the show on the air, we say thank you for making us your choice, and have yourself a wonderful day.